Good evening and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Season 7, Episode 9, Covenant. Before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
That is correct. And as I say every single week, you should find us and follow us because we're great, we're awesome, and this episode is about to really just kind of show you why, in my opinion, because as one of the many episodes that we've kind of been geared up for, this one has a lot to cover, a lot to deal with here,
Yeah.
a lot of perspectives, and I've just been so excited and eager to get to this episode. So here it is, finally. Now, before, of course, we dive into all that, we always like to give a little bit of a check-in with one another, and it has been a little bit of time since we've actually been here to do that and to do the show and so forth. So, really, David, how has your last few weeks been?
Yeah, let's see. The I'll have an update about work a little later on. For the moment, I'll just say that it was kind of a slow week, which was unfortunate. It was crazy though. I had a number of people come in yesterday, and I had two couples that are going to come back on Wednesday to potentially buy from me because we were about to have our Memorial Day sale start. And I was like, the sales doesn't start just yet, just a few days. And I won't be here on Tuesday when it starts. I'll be here on Wednesday. And so they both were like, we'll be back on Wednesday. And one of those couples, an older, like in their 70s, great couple, love talking with them. They were in the store for over an hour. But they also came in again the second time later that night around 7:15 before closing. And again, it's fun to talk to people, but there was a part of it that was like, oh, I can't get my reading done because you came into my store. Like
I
that's my big
mean,
problem is I can't get my reading done.
that is definitely one of the things about the job that I both miss and don't miss. I
Yeah.
mean, when you're spending, upwards of 10, 12 hours every day
Mhm.
in that one location, and you may see maybe, three, four people if you're lucky, but you go so long without like actually talking to anyone, you do get kind of set in doing whatever else it is that you're doing, watching a show, reading a book, whatever it is. And so when someone comes in, it's hard to go from such a state of relaxation to on it and working and so forth. And wasn't necessarily envious of people who could like do it, who could jump from one thing to the next, but I did get to a point where I remember days being like, you walked in and yeah, I know I'm supposed to be making sales and everything else, but I'm like at a critical point in this book and I really want to get back to it. So,
Yeah.
so I definitely missed that, especially since we're in the middle of, or not in the middle of, but we're coming up on the end of our 9 book series, The Expanse. We're in the final book here. And I would love to just be able to sit and read it at my leisure and so forth. But yeah, now my new job is like downtime. What's
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Never heard
Exactly.
of that. We don't do that here. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, for sure. Oh man, yeah. The book I'm reading, it's on George Mason. He was one of the founding fathers. He helped write the Constitution. However, he was one of three that didn't sign it. He objected at the end. I'm at the point in the book where they're writing the Constitution, they're debating it, and so I'm not quite there yet. Why he doesn't end up signing it right at the moment, but yeah, he was one of the three that didn't sign it. And you've been reading the Federalist Papers. So there was like the Federalist Party, the Federalist Group.
Mhm.
You could say that George Mason was kind of one of those anti-federalists. Um, it's an interesting book. It's the only problem with it is that George Mason was a policy wonk, so it's very heavy into policy debates and minutia and details. And so the book is like the print is small, the content is about particular things that it's not got quite the narrative energy of other biographies have had. And so it's been good, but it's been more. of a slog to get through than some of my others. So I am behind on it already. I've already kind of accounted for that in my head, but I
I
was.
was gonna just say what you were saying, that I was like, there'd be an interesting book to read, a counter to the Federalist Papers, but then you started talking about, how hard it is to get through, and I will definitely give, the founding fathers credit.
Mhm,
Those guys were great orators. They had great ways of presenting their points in a very broad way that was there was meter to what they were saying. You could follow the rhythm of what they were saying, and that probably lends a lot to their popularity. It wasn't just that what they were saying meant a lot to people, but they inspired with their
mhm,
words. When you
mhm,
get into stuff like that, like again, I have not read this book. I have not read George Mason's perspective, but
mhm.
I'm sure that when you get into that kind of minutia of detail on things like that, it becomes boring less because what you're saying isn't important, but more because the way you're saying it sounds more like whining and complaining and people, and no matter what what century, no one wants to hear that.
Yeah,
No one wants to hear someone nitpicking a thing. We all know
yeah,
that, especially grand ideas, new ideas, noble ideas. We know that they're not perfect,
right.
but yeah, to hear you be like, "Well, I'm not going to sign it because of," it's like, yeah, okay, go away. Like we don't care anymore.
Right,
So
right.
yeah,
Well, it's funny you say that because his real problem is that he's a pessimist. He's a guy who doesn't trust democracy. He doesn't think people can be trusted to vote on good leaders. He's worried about people voting in corrupt people and people making corrupt alliances. And he just worried about corruption, 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 corruption. And so I think he gets to the point where he's like, I just can't trust that anybody won't be corrupt. So I just can't get on board with the Constitution. And I mean, he's not wrong. It's just one of those things of like the whole idea. The reason the Constitution is kind of fascinating is because, as Benjamin Franklin said, uh, you know, or I think, well, not just Benjamin Franklin, but the whole idea behind the Constitution was you got all of these brilliant minds in a room together for like 4 months to try and hammer out a founding document for a whole country. Like most countries bumble along, and wherever they're at is, after hundreds and thousands of years of them being a country, and that's just where they're at. But like they were trying to start from scratch,
yeah,
do this right from the get go, and so there's a lot of brilliance going on. And it's really fun to read this book because it does talk about how George Mason does have his fingerprints all over the Constitution. He did have his say, and he was a very convincing person. But like, it's sad that he didn't just say, "Okay, I'm gonna take a risk and go for it," because
mhm,
it means that we, as like 250 years later, we're like, ah, he's the guy who was the pessimist. He was the guy who said, I don't like it. He loses his stature a bit because of his choice to not go along with it. But it's fun to it's fun to read because it's history and to know where these people fit in. But when you read passages about they were discussing land grants over in the whole Ohio region, you're like, okay, all
exactly,
right.
exactly. I mean, like I said, when you have people who are trying to start something from scratch, like you said, we already know that you're not going to be able to hit every single detail. And that was kind of the point. It was, this is supposed to be a living document that is going to change with time. We understand that um, we'll never be able to cover every single thing because we don't know what all is going to come down the pipeline. So
Right,
we're trying to give a good foundation and a solid framework from which our descendants will be able to operate and grow according to countries' needs. So then when
right,
you still have someone who's like, yeah, no, we still need to talk about, this, and they want to try to pinpoint every single thing, it's just like you're directly in conflict with what we know is going to happen in the sense of we know we can't know everything. You're
right,
trying to write and prepare for everything, and that's just impossible. So
right.
again, it kind of makes you sound like you're whinging a bit there. So yeah, I might still check it out after I fully finish the Federalist Papers, but definitely I can see if what you're saying is correct about this individual. I can definitely see why he lost his notoriety, his status, so
Yeah,
forth afterwards. Because again, you're trying to do something that is by its very nature hard to do. You
yeah,
can't plan for every single thing. There's just no way.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but other than that, anything else that you want to
I just
mention?
want to say that I've been watching The Bear, which is the FX show that was very
Excellent show.
popular. Oh
Yes,
yeah, okay, you've
I've already
watched it.
seen
Okay,
it. Yeah.
yeah, I'm on season two. I've one last episode of season two.
Okay.
Um, I tried watching it about a year ago, and that first episode, it's like the idea is the show is about just how high stress the restaurant industry is. And that first episode, I was like, I don't know if I want to watch a show where people are just constantly yelling and screaming at each other for 30 minutes at a time. But the reason the show is obviously successful is because you have that, but then you have all of these people working through a lot of their issues to become
Yeah.
better people, become better versions of themselves. The main character, Carmi, he's willing to apologize when he thinks he's messed up, and other people are willing to hear that. So it's actually a great show. I really see why people love it, and I've been enjoying it a lot. So I have one more season. I assume season four is probably on TV right now, and it's just not on Hulu yet. But yeah, I'll be getting on to season three here pretty soon. So,
Yeah, I watched it, I think right at a year ago, as a matter of fact. So I might be a little bit behind because because I also watched it on Hulu, and at the time they didn't have one of the seasons. So I mean, you go back and see if that's season three or not. But
yeah. Yeah, season
um,
two is them trying to reopen the restaurant. Season one ends with them being like, "Oh, we realize we actually have some money. Let's use that money to restart the business and try and change it up." And season two is all about the stress of reopening the restaurant.
mhm,
So I imagine season three is like, okay, here we go.
yeah.
So if that sounds familiar to you, then
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Um, I also love the show. As a person who has worked in all level of kitchens
yeah.
early on in my life, and doing culinary arts and going to culinary school and doing all of that, and then watching a show like this and seeing people definitely operate at a level that I never got to. Like I never was doing the staging in other countries and stuff like that. I never did things on that level,
Mhm,
but I worked with a lot of people who did, and I knew like there were so many people in watching the show. I was thinking of people that I had worked with who were just like that, and I was just it cracking me up on one hand. On the other, it was just like I'm so glad I don't do that anymore.
mhm,
I still love to cook, and I still like to create things on my own time in my own kitchen in my own space, and so
mhm.
forth. But yeah, watching that was just a lot of nostalgia, but then also a lot of fun. The acting is great on the show. I don't think
It really is.
anybody,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think anybody turns in a crappy performance. Barenthal's in that as well.
Yes,
We
John
were just talking
Bernthal,
about
baby.
John Barenthal. We were just talking about him showing up in stuff, movies, TV shows. The man, I don't think he ever sleeps. He's
Yeah,
in everything.
yeah,
Him and um, man, now I'm just blanking on his
yeah.
name. The dude
Uh,
from The Last of Us,
yeah,
um,
yeah. Oh gosh, you have
Pedro
me.
Pascal.
That's it.
Pedro Pascal.
Two of
The
them
two
could
of them
just
have they've cornered the market on this, on just being everyman.
a black hole would form if the two of them were ever
Yes,
seen together.
yes. The two of them, if the two of them are in a movie, it would be an amazing movie, but also a movie you would not be allowed to watch because they'd be everybody. It would break your brain. Um, but yeah, I love the show. If you've worked in restaurants at all, I think that you'll love the show. For me, the defining characteristic of the show is the number of characters who start off seeming like such despicable people. For one reason or another, they seem to be this way, but then we watch as one, you learn their backstory, and two, you watch them change and you watch them
Yeah.
actively work to be better versions of themselves. And I really
Yes.
like that.
Yeah. Richie is
So
like the number one guy for that. Yeah.
yeah,
He
yeah.
in season two, just to be a little spoiler for people who haven't seen it yet, but like he's the guy who like doesn't have a place. He's the loudmouth dude, and he goes off and for like a week goes and trains at a high end restaurant and comes back and he's like, I am in. Like I wear suits now.
Hmm.
Yeah, his
He's like
transformation
a
is
complete 180. He goes from being such a kind of loud douchebag to he's just like he's invested in everybody. He
yeah,
wants to not just like impress their customers, but he's working with the chefs and stuff to help them out and to
yeah,
be more aware of how, their emotions play off each other and how they can be better
yeah,
for each other. It's really nice.
yeah.
So yeah, if you're at all interested, I would also recommend
Yeah,
that
and
show.
what's great about the show, like I said, Carmi's willing to like say I'm sorry, but like his scene when he says I'm sorry to Sugar, the blonde sister of the main character Carmi, like he sits down, he says I want to apologize, and she calls someone else in. She doesn't believe it. She wants to kind of humiliate him a little bit, like oh you want to apologize? Say it to me and this guy. And he does it, and she's like, "Oh wow, that was like." Both of them are like, "Okay, that was a legitimate like apology. Like that was great." And they like
Mhm.
they hug, and it there's an emotional core to the show, which definitely is why it's so popular. And I see it now that
Yeah.
I've had a chance to watch it. So yeah, anyone out there who wants a show that's kind of well high intensity but a really great character show, not sci-fi obviously, but
Yeah,
yeah,
but on that note, real quick before you leave this show, there is another person who gives to me a standout performance, and they're in it very little, but the few scenes they're in it are amazing, and that's Jamie Lee Curtis, who plays the bipolar, I'm gonna say, mother
yes,
in the show.
yeah,
Again, she's in it very little, but
yeah,
her scenes are amazing. And it's
yeah,
just like I knew that Jamie Lee Curtis was a good actress. I'd seen her in things before, but
right,
man, I swear she nails this role. She absolutely sells it.
yeah,
And there's a scene in particular where like it's where the restaurant is doing its reopening and it's finally happening and she's invited to the grand opening and everything, but no one thought that she was going to actually show up, and it kind of comes into this big deal as to whether or not she's going to show up. And then it turns out that she makes it there, and she's like outside and everything, but then it just becomes too much and it's overwhelming her and she can't actually come in and do anything. I loved that scene. I was like, that was perfect. Like I don't
yeah,
know like all the ins and outs of what her true deal is. And they never really say like what it is she's officially got, if she or
right,
whatever it is. But man, I thought she did a fantastic job. And I mean,
yeah,
I think out of the entire show run so far, she may be in 15 minutes of show,
yeah,
but it's great. She's fantastic. So yeah,
yeah.
go watch it. It's worth it. The show is worth it.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah.
Recommend it. Anything you've been watching or doing?
So I have I don't know. I've been kind of all over the place with shows and stuff. It hasn't like watching things really hasn't been my focus. Again, I have been more focused on getting through the final book of The Expanse. We just got to this. If you followed our After Dark episode, of course,
Yeah,
we're here. I'm already enjoying this one. They've given me some answers immediately to some things that happened in the last book, so I've been enjoying that as well. The other thing, of course, is I've been really focusing on um, workouts and health stuff. I ran into some issues, and I don't think I've talked about or given any updates about in a while. And it was mainly that, while I was, continuing to do the workouts and stuff, and I definitely noticed that I was getting stronger, I kind of hit a plateau when it came to any kind of weight loss or true body transformation, which was initially the whole point in doing a lot of what I was doing. And so I couldn't really figure out why. And I also started noticing that I was having a lot of pain, and it was beyond just like the standard kind of dull aches and stuff like that that kind of go with workouts and weightlifting and everything else, And it was just stuff that just really didn't seem to want to go away. And I don't like relying on pills or medication and a lot of that stuff, if I don't have to. And I knew so many people who, would, pop Advil, whatever, for the littlest thing. I just never wanted to be that kind of person. But it became concerning to me when I got to a point where I was constantly tired. I was always in pain. And again, my workouts were losing their effectiveness, and then my ability to just kind of get through a full workout was starting to suffer. So went to the doctor. had some tests done, and turned out that I actually had some issues with my liver and liver enzyme production and all
Mhm.
that kind of stuff. So turns out, there's like, I forget what they're called, but there's two main liver enzymes that your body produces, and they need to stay within a certain range. Now, this range can fluctuate as you get older, and if you talk to your doctor at all, they'll tell you kind of where you should fall um, when it comes to like that. Well, mine were apparently at a point where it was definitely concerning. And so, again, my doctor was like, well, one of the things that can definitely help this out is um, losing weight. And I was like, well, duh, like that's what I've been trying to do, and I'm having some issues. So after doing some more blood work and stuff like that, um, started talking about different things I could do to help myself with that, and I got prescribed the new medication, which um, I've now been on for about a week, and I swear it's like a night and day difference. Like,
Great.
my energy is better, my focus is better. I just overall feel better, and the pain's gone. And it's not a
Fantastic.
not relying on massive amounts of like aspirin and everything else. Which, by the way, I found out that if you do that for a long enough period of time, it will damage your liver. And I was like, well, that was kind of what I was doing way back when in college. You play a game, you get hurt, and you would just grab, 4 or 5 Advil, down it, and go. Well, when you're doing that consistently, 3 to 4 to even 5 times a week, and that's 4, 5, 6 years of you doing that,
Your liver's like,
definitely
stop.
can. Yeah, yeah. On top of the fact that I was also a very, typical college student who, maybe drank a little more than I should, and all that kind of stuff, and certainly continued that on for probably longer than I should have before I finally got to a point where, I didn't drink as much. Like, I don't drink nearly as much now um, as I used to, and even that, like, I know that could potentially not be much if you knew me, but like now it's just like I don't know. Restrict it mainly to like special occasions, and even then, I have like a 2 to 3 drink limit depending on where I'm at and who I'm with and everything else. So it could be months before I'll have another drink again. You know,
Mhm,
so
mhm.
I've definitely calmed all of those things down, but still, there
Right.
was a long time when I definitely didn't care.
Your liver was like,
Um,
I'm coming back to remind you of all those
yeah,
things you did.
exactly. So I say all that to say, if you are a man of a certain age or a man approaching a certain age, and you've noticed that your general fatigue seems to last longer than anything else, coffee doesn't seem to cut it. You're having a hard time getting through, your day, through workouts or anything. I would strongly suggest you talk to your doctor, do the blood work, see where your liver enzymes are, and then start looking into getting it treated. Even if they're not at a point where it's your levels are concerning, or you need to look at potential surgeries or any of that stuff, definitely look into things that will help you to take care of your liver. There are a lot of over the counter things you can do right now.
Mhm,
There's a lot of herbs and supplements and stuff like that that you can take, which will help with detoxifying the liver, which are
mhm,
readily available right now. And you know, as much as there are your snake oil salesmen out there, there are legitimate things
mhm.
that you can do to help boost your overall liver health and immunity and so forth. So definitely check it out. Um, it's it's made a night and day difference for me. So
Right.
there you go.
Gotcha.
So that's really how I spent my last week or two with everything else, and I'm eager to get into this show. So, as I like to say, we're not here to talk about all of those things. If you want more information legitimately about the liver stuff, and if you want to know what I've been taking and all that kind of, I don't have a problem with sharing it. But now's not the time. We'll get into that
Yeah.
some other time. Um, want to talk about this episode, Covenant, the glorious return of Gold Dukat,
Wow.
and
Whew.
yeah, what a guy, right?
Oh my god.
So, do you want to give the recap or do you want me to do it?
I mean, I'm happy to do it. Gosh, man, it's just such an intense episode. There's so much that
Well,
happens that I feel like you
okay.
have a better handle of details. So
Okay, yeah. So
yeah,
for the sake of getting us to discussion, I'll do it, and it's
yeah,
just going to be a very brief summation.
right.
Again, go watch the episode. It's available on Paramount Plus, as is all of the episodes. And you can go watch it, and then you can listen to us when you know replay our episode later on. This episode starts with Bashir, Esri, and Odo. They're in Quark's bar. Odo is waiting for Kira to come out of her religious service. She comes out. She's feeling very kind of relaxed, and she talks about that the sermon was about forgiving people. And Odo kind of goes into how he wishes that he had some kind of faith, something or another, so he could go to services with Kira, and Esri, for some reason, thinks that that's really sweet. But I don't know. I found that part a little odd because his whole reason for wanting to have faith was just to be with Kira, not because he actually really wanted to believe anything. And to me, that's not a good reason to want to have faith. So, but I mean, that was a minor thing in comparison to the rest of the
We'll
episode.
talk about that for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So anyway, Kira, we see her later on in her quarters. She gets a visit from Vedic Fala, who is the teacher she had as a child during the occupation, who instructed her on her faith and religious tenets. He gives her what appears to be, I thought it was like a little ember, so it looks like a little crystal.
Mm,
It starts to glow, and it turns out it's a transporter
transponder.
yeah, transponding device. So it basically is a locator beacon so that they can log on to her signal, and they beam her all the way from Deep Space Nine to Empok North, the sister station to DS9, formerly Terok Nor.
Right,
So under Cardassian rule, Deep Space Nine was Terok Nor, and the sister station is Empok Nor.
right,
We know Empok Nor. We've seen this station a few times now. This is where um, O'Brien and Garrick and Nog were when Garrick came down with crazy disease and tried to murder everybody. This is also where in the episode The Magnificent Ferengi, where they took um, that one Vorda to exchange him for Ishka as well. So
right.
we're aware of this station.
Yes,
But now it's being inhabited by a bunch of rogue Bajorans who are followers of the Paul Wraith cult. If you'll remember, also the Paul Wraith cult, this is one that we've seen a few times as well. They were formerly known as the Circle, all the way back in season 2, when they had kind of vandalized the station. They were also responsible for the attempted murder of or murder, assassination, whatever, of Captain Cisco when he had left the station and was back on Earth living with his father and son, and was, you know, the scene where he's cleaning oysters in the back, and
right,
the guy comes up to him in the red cloak and tries to cut him open.
right,
That's the same cult members who do this, and so now they're a group. They're about 50 strong, living on the station, trying to slowly convert the station into this self-sustaining city
right,
utopia or whatever. So Vedic Fala has now become a full-fledged member of this cult. He believes that the Pirates are the true prophets, and that, you know, following the story of the mythos of the prophets, the ones currently in the Celestial Temple kicked the Pirates out because the Pirates wanted to have more direct influence over the Bajorans and Bajoran culture and so forth. And he believes that had they actually been in power and been able to stay in the Celestial Temple, then the occupation of Bajor never would have happened.
right,
Um, he tells her that, you know, the master wanted her brought here because the master believes that she has a special place in the Parwraith cult. He takes her to meet the master, and it's none other than Gul Dukat. Which, you know, it's important to make this distinction really quick. We
God.
call him Gul Dukat, but
Right.
Gul is a rank in the
Gotcha.
Cardassian military. That is
Right.
not his first name.
It's
His
just
name
Duke.
is just Dukat.
Right.
You know,
Does he even
so
have another like a first name? Is he
I don't know. We haven't really heard anyone call him anything other than Dukat
Dukat.
or Gul Dukat. We
Right.
know that they have a two name system because we've met other Cardassians like Tekeni Gamor, who was the guy who played the surrogate father to Kira some
Mm-hmm.
episodes ago. So
Right.
we know they have a dual name system as well. We've just never heard it for him. It's kind of become Gul Dukat is his name, but I always crack up when I hear because I'm like, that's not his name. That's not like not totally.
Right.
So anyway, it's Gul Dukat. Now Gul Dukat has gone through this kind of transformation here. He believes that since he was inhabited by a Paraith at one point, that they have given him their blessing to move forward and bring this religion into the forefront of not Klingon but Bajoran society. He has these followers who all feel abandoned by the prophets and feel embraced by the Paraiths. He's leading them in various worship services. He's got his earring pierced as a sign of, as he says, a sign of the covenant he has with these believers and the
Mm-hmm.
Paraiths, and he's again instructing them. Kira, highly skeptical, also very much aware of the kind of person that Ducat is. She at one point tries to escape. She gets her hands on a phaser. uh, we don't know if she's really going to shoot Ducat or not. It seems like she's going to, but then the people stand in front of him, blocking him from her, and then she gets knocked out. Ducat has her brought back to her quarters where he tends to her wounds from being knocked out. But of course, she's upset that when she wakes up, she's like partially undressed. As we know, Ducat has this very unnatural, very unhealthy obsession with her. And he tells Kira that that was the whole reason that he brought her here. He believes that if he can convince her to open her heart to the Paw race, i.e., open her heart to him,
Yeah.
then he can then convince any Bajoran
Right.
that they should follow in this path.
Right.
We meet a couple, Mika and Benyon. Mika is pregnant, and she has the honor of being the first woman to um,
Be allowed.
be allowed to have a child in this new order. And
Yes.
this is where Vedic Fala explains that you have to get special permission from the master to wed and to have children. And we find out that, this is otherwise they have to engage in complete abstinence.
Right.
We find out that Ducat had been meeting with the couple as kind of like a guiding counselor type situation. He prayed with them in private, a few times and everything. And once it was deemed that their union was pure or whatever, they were allowed to have children. Mika, who is, like I said, she's pregnant. She's due any day. We are there for the blessed event. Of course, she gives birth to this child. They bring her out from the back of the infirmary, and she does not look pleased. Like from moment one when she comes
Yeah.
around the corner, she does not look pleased. Um, Benyon comes around to see the child.
The
He
husband. Yeah.
pulls the blanket back, and we see this clearly half
Hybrid.
Cardassian child.
Yeah. Cardassian Bajoran
And
child. Yeah.
Benyon is shocked to say the least. Ducat comes over, picks up said baby, and then he begins to tell everyone what a miracle this must be because the Paraiths have blessed them with the symbol that his covenant is the real deal and that he is the emissary delivered, basically. And they have given them proof of this in the form of this half Cardassian baby. Kira immediately is like, no, you're the father. That's your baby, but these people just eat it
Eat
up.
it up. Yeah.
Like there's a brief flicker moment of confusion, but then boom, that's transmuted to, nah, it's a miracle. He did
Right.
it. Praise the master.
Right.
So, we then see later on, uh, Garrick, not, I'm sorry, man. I got Cardassians on the brain. Gul
Yeah.
Dukat goes and meets with Mika airlock, which right away warning bells are going off. Never meet with a Cardassian in an airlock by
Anyone
yourself.
in an airlock, never privately go
Mm,
into an airlock with
well,
somebody. Yeah.
yeah, that's true. Never go to an airlock with anybody. But yeah, don't do that. That's bad. Like across all of sci-fi,
Yeah.
there's never been a time where meeting secretly in an airlock has ended well for any character. So,
Anyway.
so there's that.
Ugh,
So Kira, while this is going on, she is talking with Vedic Fala, and she's like, "Come on, man, that's his baby. You guys got to see what's going on here." And Fala's like, "Not having it. You're not going to throw shade on this blessed event." And she's
right.
like, "Okay, well, let me talk to them. Let me talk to Mika. Let me talk to Benyon. Let's see what they say. Whatever." And he's like, "You can talk to him, but you better be, discreet about this. You don't go making insinuations." He's like, "Fine, I won't." So he takes her to meet with Benyon, who is painting this mural of Dukat and him, the many children or whatever. And Kira can't help herself but throw a little shade his way. And she's like, maybe one of those children you should turn into a half party,
Yeah. Yeah.
because to celebrate the blessed event, right? And so they continue to talk, and he answers a couple of her questions. One of them being, when you were doing your counselorship with Ducat, did you ever pray with him privately
Privately.
by
Yeah.
yourself? And he was like, yeah. And she's like, okay, well, did Mika? And he's like, yeah. So, insinuating there that during one of those private meets, Mika and Ducat got busy, which then in the next scene we see Ducat pretty much, no, not even pretty much, but he definitely confirms. He meets with
Meets with
Mika in the
Mika.
airlock. She's like, I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I don't know if he buys the story of the whatever. And he's like, why didn't you tell me the baby was mine? She's like, I didn't know. I wasn't sure of anything. And he's like, yeah, I apologized. I was weak. I had this moment's weakness, this moment's indiscretion. It should never have happened. Blah blah blah. The classic stuff you hear from these people.
Right.
And to which she says, I forgave you a long time ago. Don't worry about that, whatever. But Benyon is my husband.
I
I
don't
don't
know
know
if
if
I
he
could lie
believes
about it.
it. And if he asks me, I don't know if I'm going to be able to lie to him. To which Ducat says, I understand. You shouldn't lie. Don't, whatever.
Stay
Goes
right
to
here.
leave. You stay here. Right. Wait for me to leave. And then in about 5 minutes, then you leave. He locks the airlock and lets the air, drain out. And she passes out of the thing. But luckily for her, Fala and Kira were looking for her. Dukat sneaks away. They discover Mika in time, even though
Mm.
she is now hypoxic from the
Yeah.
lack of
Anyone who's
air.
watched The Expanse is going like, nope,
Yeah,
nope, nope.
yeah. So we know you can survive, but there should have been more damage to her. But
Yeah.
again, this was
She's
the '90s.
unconscious, pretty
This
heavily
was yeah,
unconscious.
this
Yeah.
was the '90s. So yeah, not only she's unconscious, unconscious, but they keep her sedated
Yes.
to help her fully recover.
Right.
Back in the infirmary, Ducat shows up and he's like, what's going on? What happened to her? Is she going to recover? Thank goodness we found her, or you
Yeah.
found her when you did. Seal all the airlocks, have our techs run through everything, make sure this accident can never happen again. And Kira's like, come on. What
Come on,
you
everybody.
really,
Yeah.
yeah, keep him away from her. You mean you want to make sure that, she doesn't, get murdered, another attempted murder, whatever. So he has her sent away. And then we see Ducat by himself in his quarters and he's praying to the Pares. And he's like, give me a sign. Like he's like, he goes to this whole thing about how he knows that his indiscretion has cast his covenant into jeopardy, and he wants to give him a sign as to how to move forward. How can he, repair the damage he's done, and so forth. And he almost, sounds like a true believer in this moment. Um, but in typical Cardassian fashion, he comes up with the only way to solve the problem is for everyone to die. So he goes to Kira one last time. He's talking about how, he has fallen, whatever, but he knows what he must do. And he makes it seem like he's going to kill himself. He holds up this pill of a drug that's designed to not only kill you, but it renders your body to dust, once it's worked its magic. So at the end, there'll just be piles of dust in a room. He calls everybody into service, and makes the grand announcement. The Power Wraiths have given me a vision. The time has come for us to join them and carry on the fight against the prophets and back into the celestial temple. But there's a catch. You can't do it in your current form. We have to shed our fleshly corporeal bodies and join them in a non-corporeal state. So he's passing out. He's got the plates full of the drug. I think it's called promazine. Got all these plates around. Everybody pick up your pill, and at the appointed moment, we're going to take these and we're going to die together, and we're all going to go. Kira, who's been locked in her quarters this whole time, figures out a way to escape, makes her way across Empuknor's promenade. She's on the top level of what would be Quark's bar, if that was Quark's bar on Empuknor. And she's up on the top level. She sees Dukat standing there, and just before he goes to take his pill, she jumps on him from the top balcony and knocks him down, causing him to not only knock over a tray of all the pills, but to lose the one that he had been holding. Now he's scrambling to try to pick up a pill, but I mean, why would you be scrambling? What's up, man? Just grab one and
Yeah.
go. And so, he Fala picks him up off the ground, and he's like, "Hey, don't," he's calming everybody back down. And he's like, "Just we're going to continue." And he gives Ducat another pill.
Right.
And now Ducat is kind of panicking and he's hesitating. And Kira realizes what the situation is. And she starts calling him out on it. She's like, "Go ahead, take it. If all the pills are the same, what's the problem? What's the holdup? All this kind of stuff." To which everybody looking around is like, "Yeah, what's going on? Like, we're all getting ready to take this. Why do you suddenly seem so panicked?"
Right.
And then he starts to backpedal. "Hey, the Paul race want me to stay and
Yeah.
convert some more people, but you guys got to go now," and all this stuff. And they're like, "Yeah, no." And everybody starts throwing the pills at him and screaming and shouting. And Descartes, becomes unhinged in this moment. He's screaming about how
How
they've
dare
turned
you?
their back on the prophets and they've broken their covenant. And he rips the earring off of his ear and tosses it down. And he's like, "You guys will never be able to, join the power race," and so forth. And he hits the little badge on his hand, which allows him to beam away, showing he had an exit strategy plan the
The whole
whole
time.
time. Vedic Fala, now totally lost.
Mhm.
All of his religious everything has now been stripped away thanks to his, belief in Dukat and so forth. Can't take it, so he takes one of the pills and he dies. He dies in
Right.
Kira's arms, as a matter of fact. Um, Ducat, before he had locked Kira in her quarters, he said he had sent a message to Deep Space Nine so that they knew where she was. The Defiant shows up and picks her up, and all the surviving Wraith refugees,
Right.
seemingly to transport them back to Bajor. We don't get to see that part of it, but that's essentially it. That's it. That's the episode. That's the end. Again, there's a lot there. A lot of this episode. Um, and I can't wait to get to it.
There is so much to talk about. Yeah.
We also get to bring back one of my favorite segments. Back in the '90s, we get to do that
We
because
haven't done that in ages.
we
Oh
really
wow.
haven't. We really haven't. I have dropped the ball significantly, but this episode brings us to something that was major that happened in the '90s, and I can't wait to do that. So,
You want to wait for
yeah.
that? Do that later? Do it now?
Actually, we'll do it now. We'll
Do it
do it now. We'll
now.
do it
Do it
live.
live. Yeah.
Yes. So,
We are live.
um,
Hello, everyone.
yeah, we are live. So, and I actually remembered this. I remember this. So back in 1997, there was a group called Heaven's Gate. They
Yeah.
were they were a cult. They
Mhm.
were like the cookie cutter, cut out prime example of a
Dictionary
cult.
definition, picture in the
Yes.
encyclopedia. Yeah.
They had suckered in so many people
Like
from all walks
600
of
people,
life.
right?
Yeah, from all walks of life. Even another Star Trek tie-in, Nichelle Nichols' brother was a member of the Heaven's Gate cult, and he was one of many who unfortunately died because of the influence this cult had on them. They all participated in the suicide pact because there was the belief that um, the at the time Halley's comet, now called the Hale-Bopp comet, was on its way on its long orbit in our solar
Mhm.
system, was on its way back towards Earth, and at an appointed time, there was on its path back there was actually like a spaceship or other being or something was in the tail of the comet, and that
Right.
at an appointed time it was going to swing around and scoop up all the believers and take them on to their otherworldly life. But again, in order to do so, you gotta drink the Kool-Aid and
Literally. Yep.
give up your
The
body. So
arsenic laced Kool-Aid.
yes,
Yes.
yes. So as much as there was many attempts to get to these people, to save these people. Unfortunately, it didn't work, and like I said, in 1997, they all took their lives, and we watched on TV real time as they were going through and counting the bodies and putting people in body bags and all of it. It was shocking. It was tragic. It was like one of the worst mass suicide things that we had seen
Hmm.
in however long. It was awful, and
Hmm.
I remember again being young, and I didn't know what a cult was. I
Right.
never really got into hearing all that, and I remember them talking about this cult, and then there was another cult in the 70s where some people had died and done the same thing, suicide pacts and all that stuff. So it was major news for several months after it happened,
Yeah.
and there was also like a major crackdown on these kind of religious zealot groups. And I don't really know if anything really exists in that kind of form anymore, and it's largely because of the Heaven's Gate cult and what happened to all those people, that it's very hard, from my understanding, for them to exist these days, because our governments do, state and federal governments do watch out for them to make sure things like that can never happen again.
Right.
So, but yeah, you can go and look all of this stuff up. It's crazy when they like you can read a lot of the, like the police reports and stuff from the guys that were on the scene coming through, and just how awful it
Hmm.
made them feel to read any of that. And one of the writers for this episode, as a matter of fact, he uh, s- ha- he was a psychologist or something like that, and he studied cults and cult behavior and things like that. And that's where he got the basis for this episode from,
Right.
was the Heaven's Gate incident.
Hmm.
Um, Now, yeah, Vincent, you talk about you bring up Scientology. Depending on who you are, some people do 100% believe that Scientology is a cult. A lot of what they do is behind closed doors. It's not as transparent, seemingly, as a lot of other religions, like say um, a Baptist or what, Presbyterian or whatever it is, not as open. But I don't know. I don't know enough about Scientology to give any kind of opinion on it. And I try not to give opinions on religions, period, because I know so many people deal with religion in different ways. And I don't ever want to be like, you know, your religion is dumb, or imply that in any way. I know what I believe. I know how I want to live my life and whatever else. And I agree with something that Kira says in the episode, as a matter of fact, which is, when people try very hard to uh, bring you
Convince
into
someone
their
else.
religion and convince you of their stuff, that it's really them trying to convince themselves.
Right.
So there is that. But yeah, the Heaven's Gate stuff was what this was all about. Now, do you remember anything about the Heaven's Gate from when you were
Yeah,
growing up?
well, I don't remember it in a what it's live and I'm remembering as it's happening kind of thing. It's more like after the fact I learned about it because I would have been 7-ish at most when that happened. Um, and so because I was born in 1990, so I I wouldn't have known about it at the time per se, but I certainly knew about it afterward. Certainly know where the phrase "drink the Kool Aid" comes from,
Hmm.
stuff like that. Yeah, this episode definitely. I guess the real question is, I don't know if you were trying to make it clear. Was this episode trying to draw parallels to that event, or is it just that this happened so close to this episode coming out that it's just coincidental that things are
No, no, they directly say that. I
they
mean, like
directly
this
took
this
things from that
episode,
incident?
yeah, this episode
Yeah,
was directly inspired by the
okay.
Heaven's Gate incident. So,
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
surprised that Wikipedia doesn't seem to have anything about that. Maybe one of the other sites online that recaps episodes
Yeah,
will
go
mention it. But
to if you go to Memory Alpha, which there's a lot of
mhm,
different Memory Alphas, but the Star Trek Memory Alpha has a very detailed breakdown of this
gotcha.
episode and the behind the scenes stuff and the writing and the production team and everything else. And there's a nice bit in there about the head writer, developer of the episode and his interest in cults and his study of cults and cult behavior.
Right,
And upon hearing about Heaven's Gate and everything else, this is what he drew from when creating this episode.
right. Yeah, yeah. Oh man, there is so much to say in this episode.
Yeah,
Um,
we're already at 51 minutes, so we're
yeah,
going over tonight, guys. So
yeah.
buckle up,
Welcome
sit
to the
down.
show. Yeah,
Here we go.
yeah.
So first,
Go ahead.
so
Go ahead. Yes, go
as
ahead.
we
Go
always
ahead.
do, first thoughts, first impressions. What did you think of this episode, Mister First Time Viewer?
Yeah. Well, as the one who brings up the fact that I'm a Christian and I take that seriously, and that affects my viewing of the episodes at times and gives me thoughts and opinions. This episode goes at it directly. I mean, they don't. There is no holds barred, and that's great. I'm not saying it's wrong. And this episode is tackling some issues. Obviously, with the events as you just recapped them, and with the Heaven's Gate group, it was on people's minds, so makes sense to try and bring that into the show. Um, However, I wanted to say there was something so funny and coincidental about this episode and how it starts. You mentioned it in your recap how she said that the sermon was about forgiveness, and later on, the Vedic that she's friends with, whose name is Fala, as you said,
Hmm.
he's like, "Yeah, I tried teaching you about forgiveness, and you should forgive. Like you just hate gold dukat and all this stuff." Guess what? Our church is doing a little sermon series on starting today. Forgiveness.
Forgiveness.
Oh man, I was like, oh, this is an interesting tie-in at the beginning of the episode. Like she says when she sits down after coming from the sermon, she's like, yeah, it's really something that's hard, and like that's what we were talking
You
about
know,
today. Go ahead, go
when
ahead.
they brought that when she brought that up in the scene, and Odo kind of seemed uncomfortable at first before bringing up other stuff. I thought he was going to go in a different direction, and I thought he was going to say something like, "Oh, it's funny that that the Vedic or whomever it was that was leading your service is talking about forgiveness, considering me as station security chief, I'm aware that he was doing something that he shouldn't have been doing,
Mm,
and now he's asking for forgiveness." I thought that's where that line was going to go.
hmm
Um, I'm kind of glad that it didn't, but I thought that, and the only reason why is because little the cynic part of me, I guess. I'm so used to television shows doing stuff like that with religious figures where they seem very pious, and then we find out that behind the scenes they're doing all kinds of illicit things, extramarital affairs, um, uh, illegitimate children, so forth and so on. And
hmm
so I thought that was kind of the thing that we were getting ready to hear here in this moment, and we didn't. Um, so I like that it did play into the greater arc of the story, in which Kira is, we know that she's quite devout with her beliefs, and
hmm
so for her to then, having fresh off of a sermon about forgiveness, be confronted by the the man that she cannot forgive.
Yeah,
Um, I thought that was an interesting way to do it, especially
yeah.
considering as we watch it, you're kind of supposed to be on the edge of whether or not
This is
Dukat is
real.
legit.
And then
Yeah, and
halfway
then
through, the baby is revealed, and you're like, nope, he's always been a
never
silver son
mind.
of a gun the whole
I
time.
so I
Never.
have to
Go ahead, go ahead.
I have to admit I watched the episode again, and when Banyan pulled that thing back, and I saw that little half Cardassian baby. I laughed, and it's
Oh
been a
yeah,
while since I watched it. And I was thinking about, it, I was like, when I last watched these episodes in particular, because as I said before, like I've watched these shows many times, but the final season of this show I have not watched in a long time because it was the end, and I didn't like watching the end, so I would always go back.
right.
So I think the last time that I watched any of these episodes, I was probably 14, 15 years old. So
Wow,
now
really?
so now
Dang.
I'm seeing them as an adult, as a father,
Right.
and all that. And when I saw that, I laughed so hard. I was
Yeah.
like, of course it's
Yeah.
his baby. Like it
Right.
just, yeah, it
Yeah.
really got to me. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That reveal is so. I'm glad it happened because that literally is the halfway point because I like to watch where we're
Mhm.
at in the episode is because the ads come up and I hit mute and all that and yeah, at that point, I was like, "Oh, thank goodness," because I didn't want this episode to turn into maybe Gold Dukat has a point. Like, we know he's evil, we know he's wrong, we know that the Paw race are evil. We have evidence of that as viewers.
Mhm.
So when Vedic uh,
Fala.
Fala, I
Vedic
almost say
Vedic
falafel
Fala.
for a second. Fala, when he was like, "Nah, that Jake Cisco kid was just being crazy one time. He wasn't possessed by a Paw wraith." I'm like, no, I was there. Kira was there. In fact, she was the one being possessed by the prophets.
Yeah.
Hello.
They were
Does
shooting
anyone?
energy at each other.
Yeah. Does anyone remember it was Kira?
Right, like, and that's the thing too, like, especially for Vedic Fala, who's like, oh, he was kissed by the power race. She was also fully inhabited by
By
a
the prophet.
a prophet. So, like, shouldn't you be like in awe of her if you're in awe?
Yeah.
Like, come on, man. Oh,
Ugh.
the prophets turned their back on us. Not her. They literally took her over. So,
Yeah.
like, you're
I
trying to
mean,
convince
they
the
took her
wrong one.
over and they dissed Kai
Win.
Opaka, no Opaka,
Guy win.
Kai
Guy
Win
win.
to
Right.
her face. Like
You
that's how.
and you thought somehow that bringing her here, this guy was going to be able to sway her.
Yeah.
The prophets took her over because her belief was so strong,
Right.
so unshakable. She was the perfect vessel for them. And
Yes.
you think that he's going to be able to convince her to renounce them?
Well,
Come on.
and,
Y'all,
and
no one thought this through. Like
yeah,
no one thought this through at all.
and then like she points out to Gul Dukat to his face, like, "Hey, you killed Dax. Like, you killed my best friend." And he's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, that was unfortunate." Like that's all he can say.
Yeah, that
Of
was
course,
a
it's all he can say.
mistake. That
Yeah,
was a
I
mistake.
never intended that to happen. I fully admit that at the time I was doing it for selfish reasons, but I've changed. How many times has Gul Dukat claimed to be a changed man? Like,
Oh my God.
if we
Well,
counted
how
that, we'd
many
all be
times how many times does he claim to be a changed man to Kira?
to her
Not to
face.
other people,
Yeah,
but to Kira.
and your
He
mother
very
liked it. Oh
yeah, yeah, he
gosh. Oh
very much wants Kira to like him. And it is creepy because, and I mean for so many reasons it's creepy, but in particular, we know that when she was little Kira Nerys running around in the occupation camp, little baby girl. He was full fledged adult dude on the station screwing her mom,
yep.
So I don't really, we don't know how old Ducat is. We can kind of guess an approximate age of Kira. Let's just say she's in her, I'll be generous and I'll say she's in her mid 30s
Yeah,
here.
at best, in
She's in
terms of
her
how
mid
old she is.
30s.
Yeah,
So, and we saw her as a child in the Wrongs Darker Than Death or Night episode.
and she's
So,
maybe 10.
yeah, I'm going to say she's younger than that. She looked
Oh
way,
yeah.
I'm going to say
I
she was
again
at
being generous,
five.
10.
Yeah,
Yeah,
five. So I'm just going to say at least 25 to 30 years have passed between little Kira to the Kira that we see in the
yeah,
episode.
right.
So Ducat is at least, again, 25 to 30 years older than her. Come on, man. Come on.
Yeah,
Let it
he
go. Like,
creeptastic. Oh my
yeah,
gosh. And like that scene where he has her. There's multiple scenes, but one in particular where he has her in his quarters and he's trying to convince her. Like he gets down on his knees while she's sitting down, but his hands are like on the
multiple
chair.
times he's on his knees in front of her,
Yeah,
very close, very leaned in. And I'm
the
just,
fact that she
oh.
doesn't break out into physical violence against this man. I'm like, she's got more self control than I do. I would have I'd
Yeah.
given him the silent treatment. I would have shot him when I
So,
got the
so many
gun.
times,
I
right? I was
figured,
like, Kira, just bring that knee up real sharp, real quick. Crack that
yeah.
skull.
I
Come
mean,
on.
I figured that gun was gonna be rigged, where they knew that she was gonna go for it, and they were gonna prove to her that they loved him, so they were gonna use the moment. But it was never actually it was never really endangered, so she could throw that back in his face and be like, you never were actually in danger. I tried pulling the trigger and it didn't go off, so you knew and they knew that there was never actually any threat, so they don't love you. They knew they were playing a game just as much as you know you're playing a game. But
Oh,
they didn't do that. I wish they had. Like that punch on the back. Like, you got a
the
bruise, so now you're
classic
knocked out.
the classic sci-fi Trek punch.
Yeah.
Yeah, he hit you on your shoulder blade, and somehow you were knocked unconscious.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, when she sits up and we see the bruise on her back,
Yeah.
obviously it hit her quite hard, but still, just like, don't see how that knocked you out. I've been hit in the back before. It's never knocked me out. It's been annoying. It's
Yeah.
been painful, but I've never, been knocked out by it. But I guess there's something about that super secret double-handed whatever, which to me, this I don't know how this would ever work because it looks incredibly painful.
On that pinky.
This Yeah, you're crushing your poor little fingers here
Yeah.
doing that. So yeah, I never
Yeah,
understood why they
it's
always
more
do
the
that.
balls of your hand here. Like,
Yeah,
worried about
but watch when they do it. Almost every time you see them first class the hands together, and then it's a hardcore chop
yeah,
down.
yeah,
Yeah, you're breaking your own fingers before you're doing any significant damage to the
right,
person.
right,
And even if you switch it up and do this grip, I mean, it's so awkward. You're still most likely going to hurt your fingers.
right,
Yeah, not a good thing.
right.
Now, Kirk was good at uh, the delivering the judo chop blows, or as Vincent points out, the Kirk maneuver, which is where he throws his whole ass at somebody and knocks
Oh,
them down. That's the Kirk maneuver.
he
Go and
twists.
watch it. It makes no sense. He does this running leap and flips himself in midair so that his backside crashes into the individual and knocks them down. So it doesn't make any sense at all. It's like, I don't know who taught you that move, but whatever, man. So
Right. Yeah.
but yeah, they don't know how to fight in space. That's kind
Yeah.
of the lesson that you get unless you're a Klingon.
Right. Well,
Um
and then they
yeah.
always pick you as the one to make a
Well, right.
use
Then your moves are rendered useless because whoever you're fighting against is so overly strong that no matter
it.
what you do, it
Uh,
doesn't work.
I watched another clip this week. YouTube showing me clips. I forget which one it was, but no, it's the one where Data and Troy are possessed by those
Oh
spirits,
yeah.
and Data does this move to Worf. Like, doesn't even make a full he stops it here, but he hits Worf and knocks him back. Or was that Picard? Was that Picard? He did that too.
No, that was, I think that was because
Okay,
Worf
but
gets
no,
taken out.
by
Worf gets taken out by
O'Brien.
no. Worf gets taken out by Deanna, the weakest of the three. Remember, she grabs his wrist
Well, O'Brien
and
attacks him first. That's what I'm thinking of. O'Brien attacks him first, and then Troy
yeah,
finishes the job. Is what I think. Yeah,
all of it ridiculous.
yeah.
Our big burly Klingon is taken out by
Troy.
an Irishman and and I have Beta Z. Get out of here. It makes no sense. Get out of here.
O'Brien
So,
though, man, he's been on Miles. What's his name? The actor.
Colm,
Miles Cole.
Colomini.
Cole
Yeah.
Meany. Sorry, I'm saying Miles. Anyway, he's been around
Because
for
that's his first
ages
name,
ago.
Miles O'Brien. That's the character.
That's
So,
why I said it. Yeah.
but yeah, he's been around for a minute.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. The This whole episode is very interesting for me because it's talking about the other than the forgiveness angle, which I felt unfortunate about because we just had again a sermon about it today at church. They start with forgiveness is hard. You should work to do it, and then the Vedic he turns that on Kira by saying that you're not willing to forgive Gul Dukat and believe this miracle, and like he discounts he says that, oh, if the prophets could stop an entire fleet, this massively observed event, we saw what happened, And compare that to, wait a minute, there's a simpler explanation for how this child is
Yes.
part Cardassian. Come on
Yeah.
now. Like the
That
fact that you
that's
can't, yeah,
that's one of the
like
things that I
Faith,
love so much about this episode. It was, because and so here's the thing about the episode that um it makes it so unique because this episode it's about a world in which the gods and their demons are confirmed to exist. This is
right.
not something that we have in our world. We don't have this kind of confirmation. That's
There's no
that's the basis of faith. Yeah, we don't. Right.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
We There is no celestial temple that you can just travel to at a whim
Right,
and have a conversation with your god with,
right,
you
right,
know,
right.
and
Yes,
and that can be observed even by people who are not of your
yes.
faith and so forth.
That's a huge part
So,
of this too.
yeah.
Yes,
So in watching this episode, we're very much outsiders here as well, being brought into this universe, and we know that the prophets exist. We also know that the Pares exist. We see these things. So for a person like Fala, who seemingly was at one point a devout follower of the prophets, to turn his back on what he's already observed that they've done, and even the fact that he brought up that the prophets made a whole fleet of Dominion ships disappear.
right,
It was kind of alarming to me that he would do so because I was just like, you are actively observing your gods doing things,
right,
and you're still turning your back on them and choosing their enemies.
right. Yeah. Well,
Wild.
yeah. Well, I mean, the real thing. So let me put it this way: his crisis of faith is that the Cardassians were in. They took over Bajor and ruled it, and were brutal rulers for 50 years. Right.
Yes.
Okay. So crisis of faith is that the Bajoran prophets did not stop this horrible event from happening. Now, Kira says several times in the episode that we don't always know the will of the prophets, and that's hard. It's confusing. But faith is part of moving through
Is
that.
believing that they have a plan, that we are on a
Right.
path, and
Right.
we have to trust in that path.
Exactly. So, but what's so crazy about all that is that this Vedic goes from having a crisis of faith about these prophets to then saying that the guy who did all these terrible things, all I needed from him was just some proclamation of I'm sorry to start following him. Um, I mean, the thing about Gul Dukat's change of faith and all that is he doesn't have to do anything to prove that he sacrificed anything about himself for this new belief system. He was already kicked out of the
Not
Dominion
really, right, not
in the
yeah,
car.
exactly. He takes the things that have already happened to him
Right.
as proof of his sacrifice.
Right.
If the Pares, like that's what he's saying, the Pares have already chosen me. They chose me a long time ago,
Right.
and that's evident by the fact that I've lost my family, my position, my power, all of these things. And so he absolves himself of any kind of accountability in those things. It
Right.
was not me, being a bad person. It was the Paul race guiding my life. And
Right.
I'm just now coming to a point to understand that I had to go through those things in order to be the vessel that the Paul race needed me to be.
Right.
That's how he phrases everything.
Right. Exactly. Um, and on top of all that, all of this non-sacrifice on his part is then flip side, he is the leader. He is the beloved one. He's the one who's also secretly helping himself to the women. And the ultimate reveal is that he's not actually willing to die for his belief system, as he claims. He's a liar. He has an escape plan. And so when the Vedic dies at the end of the episode, and he says, faith, faith, and Kira questions in the final moments of the episode, was he saying that faith betrayed him, or he was still trying to hold on to his faith? Like she doesn't know what he was trying to say. The thing I have to say about faith as someone who is a believer is that and I don't know if, how much I've said it on screen here, but I know you and I have talked about it. But faith is not supposed to be blind. Blind faith is a mistake. Blind faith is literally closing your eyes to the evidence in front of you, like the fact that the child was born half Cardassian, and saying the most reasonable explanation for this is some random piece of information. God hates me or loves me because of some coincidence that I just made up in my own mind, or he wants me to do this or do that
So
because of something. You're supposed to take evidence and use that to generate a belief system. So, for example, the historians will agree that there was a person named Jesus who lived 2,000 years ago. Now, what the Bible says about Jesus and what those historians say, I mean, the historians aren't sharing these miracles. They're saying there was a person named Jesus. So you can take that evidence of the historical Jesus and say, well, there was a person named Jesus. What else might I know? And then you can go to the Bible and find out what the Bible has to say. If there was no evidence for anyone named Jesus, if there was no historical record for a person named Jesus, then you would be in a bad position. You would be in a position of saying, I don't care that there's no evidence. I'm going to believe anyway.
well,
And so, go ahead. Sorry.
well, that's an interesting point that you make because I feel like we've gotten to a point where we have used that to kind of get into a weird gray area of blind faith. Not we, people in general, because there are
Sure.
so many people who will say things like, "Well, I believe whatever," or it'll all work out. Like again, they absolve themselves of any kind of accountability for their actions or whatever because they just will say that, well, my faith says this, my God says this, my whatever, instead of again, like you said, taking the fact that is right in front of them, the proven fact that is right in front of them, but because they disagree with said fact, it's just easier to say, my faith lets me do this or do that or go this way or whatever.
Right.
So I like that you said that faith is not supposed to be blind, but I
Right.
do feel like people only accept certain things up to a point. The moment that there's any kind of schism in the form of a hard truth that they're supposed to accept. If
Right.
they don't want to accept it, then they also use religion to absolve themselves of having to accept it. And I think that's where I always end up finding myself in the most conflict with a lot of religious people
Sure.
because um like I don't follow any particular religion anymore. I
Right.
was raised in the Catholic faith, but that was one of the things that always stood out to me about a lot of things as I got older was
Right.
this kind of weird entitlement and hypocrisy,
Yes.
that I found with a lot of people. Now, this is not to say that all religious people are this way. I
Sure.
have encountered a lot of religious people who are deeply devout. They very much try to live by their faith, and if they, you know, they'll tell you of the struggles and the hardships they've had with trying to abide by that, but still they make their way through it.
Right.
I find myself in the most conflict with people who will, on the one hand, I went to church with them. They would, be at church every Sunday. They prayed harder than anybody else that I ever knew. But then, they drank and smoked and caroused around town and had multiple um, extramarital partners and did all kinds of stuff. And to me, that's the ultimate level of hypocrisy.
Oh yeah.
Don't stand next to me on Sunday and sing the hymns
Right.
and say the litanies and
Right.
do all those things, and then and lecture about the Ten Commandments and
Right.
the sanctity of marriage and so forth. And then I know you've got, Brenda around the way waiting on you at 12:30 when church lets out.
Right.
Like that kind of thing always
Yeah.
bothered me.
Oh yeah. Hypocrisy
S-
is always the biggest.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
and we see
Yeah.
that and we see a lot of that today. We see these people who, they they the things they advocate for, not helping the needy, not helping the homeless. We don't help children. We don't, help people who are diseased and whatever. But I'm like, aren't those also major tenets of your faith? Like,
Right.
didn't Jesus minister to the sick? Didn't Jesus have a particularly special place for children, suffer the children unto me. Like, isn't there a whole thing in there about that? Like, I mean, I may not remember the precise passages and stuff like that, but I have pretty good memory.
Right.
And helping the homeless, helping the needy, helping the less fortunate, those all were like major, major, tenets of Jesus Christ and Christianity. So when I see people who are
Right.
like, nah, we're gonna get rid of all of this stuff and kick out the homeless, and we need to build benches that have spikes in them so that no one sleeps on the bench, and like all these very hurtful things for people who have less, who can't have things, like, again, bothersome. And then it's
Yeah.
just like, well, my faith allows me to be okay with that. And it's like, how? How do you how do you reconcile those two things? And the more you try to nail them down on it, the worse it gets. The weird mental gymnastics spiraling out of control to
Yeah.
justify their cruelty while still calling themselves a Christian is where my regurgitative nature for for the hypocrisy comes up. So
Sure. Well, the only thing I'll say on that, just on a quick, as a quick aside, is that it's certainly in conservative circles. The argument is that the government isn't necessarily the best person or the best group to always handle certain issues that the church was supposed to be designed to handle. For example, homelessness or helping the local community was supposed to be a church function. And actually, one of the problems with the church today is that they have allowed the government to take over some of those roles that the church was supposed to be taking care of and have atrophied those parts of themselves. The church has atrophied some of those reaching out, like to reach out and help the poor, to help the homeless, help the sick. When you give to the church, you're not supposed to be just paying the pastor's salary. It's supposed to be almsgiving. It's supposed to be to provide services for people who need it. And that's a crisis that the church has now. The crisis of church having abandoned its role of helping
yeah,
other people, let the government take it. And when the church tries
and
to
pocket the money.
Sure. And when the church or people try and say, hey, we don't think the government's doing a good job, or we think the church should do this job, the church still has to step up. Like, if you're going to say the church should do something and the government shouldn't, well, if you say the government shouldn't and you don't let the government do the thing, and then you fail on the level of the church, the local level, to do stuff, well, then what are you doing? What are you
Yeah.
accomplishing? So it is a I would say there is an argument if you were trying to say, like, if people are being hypocritical about like government programs, there's definitely an argument that people are trying to make, and they are often failing to follow up, and that is a problem.
So I'm
So,
going to tell
yeah,
you right now, I'd never heard that part there about how the church was supposed to pick up the slack on those things. All I have
yes,
ever heard is uh, we don't want the government giving welfare checks and handouts and whatever else. But I mean, regardless, there are people who need these things for one
true,
reason or another. They need those things. Are
right,
there some people who probably just need to be smacked in the back of the head and straightened up and go get a job and whatever else? Sure.
right,
Absolutely, I will agree with that. I think that there are plenty of people who are just, lazy and don't have someone around to kick them in the pants and get them
right,
out there and into being a productive member of society.
right,
But
yes,
but there
yeah,
are also a lot of people who legitimately cannot do those things, and
sure,
they need assistance. And if you want to say the government should not be giving this assistance, fine, but it's got to come from somewhere. And on multiple levels across multiple religions, there are plenty of people or plenty of churches, organizations, religious functions that do not give back. They do not
mhm,
support those
mhm,
communities that they are in. They do
right,
not support the people there. And even the ones that do offer some support, it often comes with contingencies. You
right.
have to be a member of their church, you have to practice their faith, you have to do this, you have to do that. As far as I remember, Jesus did not have those same conditions. It was he is offering help because he wants to offer help, because it is the thing to do. It is unconditional.
Well,
And
just the basic example is the reason Christianity exploded in Rome and the Roman Empire in the first couple of years after Jesus's death was because they were doing just that. They
yeah,
were known in the Roman community, this sudden Jewish sect. Like, what are these weird Jewish people doing? And they're not always Jewish. Well, they're just taking care of everybody,
yeah.
the poor, the orphaned,
And
regardless
I'm
of anything that they
and if
profess.
And if all the religions wanted to get together tomorrow and come out with a massive press release that said, we are striking down all of these programs and we are helping these, we are going out there, we're going to round up the homeless and we're going to bathe them, clothe them, feed them, and give them job training or whatever that was they wanted to say to show that they
Right.
were picking up the slack on that,
Right.
I would 100% support it. I would sing their praises.
Right.
That's a fantastic idea. Great. Take away the government's, need to do that thing. You're doing your
Right.
part. But
Right.
so far, all you really see is don't do it. We don't like it.
Right.
But we're going to keep this money because our church needs a bigger steeple,
Right.
or
Well, and
my pastor's suit isn't shiny enough. He
right.
needs a bigger check. Like,
Well,
ugh.
here, beyond all that, what my belief is, and this is the problem the American church has had from the beginning. I'm talking about from the beginning of the country's founding, because why did people come over here? They were trying to escape, religious persecution,
Religious
right?
persecution is what we hear all the time. Religious
But
persecution.
But what did the Puritans kind of do when they were here? What they wanted, and this I think just kind of is the undercurrent of American church Christianity, is it was a I want to escape the world and its sinfulness so that I can maintain personal purity, which on some level is a good idea. Don't go hang around people who are doing evil, sinful things and then get you involved in doing evil, sinful things. That makes sense. But the Bible does talk about you need to go out and be in the world, but not of it. You need to
Yeah.
be in the world. You need to know people who aren't going to believe like you, and that needs to be a challenge. And so the American church definitely, I feel like certainly a large portion of it, part of what that is a incorrect defensiveness of like I need to maintain my purity by
Yeah.
keeping out the parts of the world that
that
might
don't
be
that I don't
sinful.
agree with, or don't believe like me, don't worship like me, whatever.
Right.
And I again, I don't understand that. Like, you can be friends with people who do not believe as you do. This
Right.
does not mean that you are, and you hear all the time, it's like you said, it's like there's this weird fear. I don't want my neighbors next to me to be in any way different because that's somehow going to change my faith, my whatever. Well, why?
Yes.
Why does it have to? I mean, I
It's
feel like
a it's a risk
certain things
averse
should change.
approach to faith
Yeah,
that is not Jesus like. Jesus was a risky dude. Jesus didn't have a home. He lived like a homeless person. He wandered. He had people following him. He didn't have a source of income. He didn't have food day to day. He is supposed to be the example of living in a radical way, outreaching to people, and living in a open and compassionate but also vulnerable way. And American Christianity has calcified into I'm supposed to protect myself against the world, and it's like no,
yeah.
you're not. You're supposed to be reaching out. You're supposed to be going out. And the reason I'm saying all
And
this. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
well, I was gonna say, like, again, I feel like if you actually did those things and you practiced your faith in that way,
Right.
you would actually end up being more welcoming to people and make them more interested in your faith because
Right.
you are not making them tick certain boxes to be a part of your faith.
Right.
It's more, well, again, it's more accessible. It's more welcoming. It doesn't matter what you look like or what region you're from or anything like that. This is accessible to all.
Right.
And I feel like we've definitely seen a departure of that. You can only be a part of this faith if you look a certain way, dress a certain way, talk a certain way, make a certain amount of money, live in a certain area. Like, it seems like all of that has really been on the uptick,
Right. Well,
and yeah,
the
go ahead.
problem too is that church in the modern era has turned into group therapy session. How do you improve your life? Like, don't get me wrong. I think the forgiveness practice we as a church are going to be working on, like, that's a good thing. Um, but if it's not paired with like you're supposed to be reaching out to people, knowing other people, sharing your life with them, and everything I've said that might be my personal interpretation. So you might find someone else out there who disagrees with me. That's my just personal interpretation, and I know that's my failure. I am someone who has not been good about making friends with other people because, like, I see their sinful life, and I'm like, oh, I
I
can't be friends with that person, or yeah, just like
I
that's the approach I've had a lot of times in life. So I know
I
that.
find that for me personally, it's especially in later years, I have found it hard to make friends,
Hmm.
but only because I will listen to people, and when they say something that I don't like, which is typically when they say something, how to describe it. I don't want to just say, racial or whatever, but it's typically when they say something negative about another group of people, I'm done. Like I don't want to have that conversation. I'm not trying to convince you of anything. You've just told me everything I need to know about you, and I don't want to have to deal with it. But other than that, I've always felt like, at least before all that, I did feel like I was a very, open and tolerant person. I try my best not to pass any particular judgment on people for how they live, how they worship, any of those things, because I know that I am not the person for that. Like I am. uh, There's nothing about me that says I'm in any way qualified to make judgment on another person's life. Like I've said, I'm not a religious person, so I can't go to a person who is and be like, you still believe in that mythological fairy tale, blah blah blah. Like I have no more evidence that it is not true than there is evidence that it is. So I can't sit there and say that my way is the only way. Just like I feel like people who practice religions also shouldn't say that their way is the only way. I mean, heck, there's enough religions out there that kind of prove that one way is not the only way.
I,
So
I have I can debate that, but go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, well, but I'm saying, like, and even then, like even with that, like I'm willing to listen though.
Hmm.
If someone wants to talk to me to a certain degree about their religion and their religious perspective, I'm willing to listen. It's when you cross the line from talking about your faith to trying to convince me to go into it with you, that's when I draw up short. Like if you the best way to and maybe I shouldn't be telling people this. Um, but the
They're
best
trying to
way,
convince me.
yeah, the best way to, I guess, bring me in is to give me your honest opinion
Right.
and then let me see for myself. The
Sure.
more you push, the more you insist, the more you pressure, the more I'm going to be dug in to go the other way. And David, you can attest, I am stubborn. I
You
am, I
are
am stubborn.
like the Chinese finger trap. Like if people try and pull their fingers out, you're that Chinese finger trap. You're like, heck no.
No, just don't do it. Don't do it. I haven't watched Breaking Bad to this day because my brother-in-law insists on that show. And I mean, how old is that show? And like every
uh
time I see him, he'll ask me,
Aughts,
"Have you watched?"
right? The
Yeah,
2000, 2000.
something like that. And he'll ask me, "Have you seen Breaking Bad yet?" And I'm like, "Well, you just added another 3 years. I'm not gonna be able to watch it. Like, stop talking about it. I'm not gonna be able to do it." So, yeah, just and we've had a few conversations about religion before, and it's
Yeah,
just,
yeah,
and again, I feel like anyway, I hope that you've taken away from those conversations that I have listened to what you said, and I've looked things up a time or two and whatever else. But again, it's if you were to ever be like, I'm gonna save your soul today, Perry. I'd be like, well, this friendship had a nice run. Gonna have to see you
yeah.
later.
One thing you have to realize if you believe that God exists and He is that the Holy Spirit is supposed to do any sort of convincing. Like you're just a man. What the heck do you think you could accomplish all by yourself? You got to have
Ugh.
someone's got to choose for themselves. You can't force a decision on anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But there are people who've tried, obviously.
Oh, there are plenty of try. Like I could when I was in college, my college chaplain used to follow me around campus and want me to discuss every little facet of my belief and why I didn't. And it all stemmed from the fact that every because I was on the football team and we played our games every Saturday, and every Saturday morning before the games would start, we would go and have breakfast as a team together, and then they would basically lock us in the cafeteria, and for the first that first 45 minutes after breakfast, the chaplain would get up there and do his thing.
Mhm.
And I didn't like it. I was like, that's not where my head is. I have a game I've got to play later on. I'm trying to get into that mindset, and this is a distraction from what I know I need to do later. And
Right.
so every time I would object to doing it, and my coach like insisted every single time that I go, and it wasn't until my senior year that he stopped and I got to leave. And I think it's because someone told on him. And, and he then made this announcement one day, and he was just like, I just found out that, we're not supposed to, lock you guys in, basically, and that, we have there's a religious clause in the school's charter or whatever. And he goes, if I in any way violated anybody's rights, if you feel that way, I apologize, this whole thing, but we're not supposed to do that. So, this is all optional. You don't have to do it, whatever. And he's like, I just found out we had an atheist on the team. And I remember thinking, who's the atheist? And I realized he was talking about me. And it was just like, at that time, I was not. Never would have described myself as an atheist at all.
Sure.
But I did very much object to being forced to do those
Right.
meetings. Because again, I'm stubborn. If they had just told me it was optional, chances are I probably would have gone.
Right.
But it was the fact that the doors were locked and we had to sit there for 45 minutes and listen to this man burn me up
Yeah.
every day. So, but yeah, that was how I spent a lot of my time, and I just got to the point where I just couldn't take it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the
but
reason I brought
go
all
ahead.
that up, just to say that, is like the reason this is so interesting for me is because the prophets in the Paul race, as we described, are physical realities in this Deep Space Nine storyline. Uh, and that means something in terms of how things go. I mean, I think of these, prophets as being kind of like the Greek gods in a sense. Like the Greeks, at least in the stories they told, were physical realities that interacted with the world. And we've seen that, and we've also seen the negative version of that with the Paul race. Like they possessed Keiko. They how did that story go exactly? She wanted him to build a
She
device.
so in
Was
that
it
episode, she Keiko had gone trekking through the fire caves on Bajor looking for rare botanical samples or whatever,
Mhm,
kicked up a Pah-wraith's hornet's nest basically and got inhabited. And
mhm.
that Pah-wraith was like, you're going to turn the station into a phased whatever being
Oh, and
that's gonna
destroy the
that's gonna
yeah,
kill the wormhole aliens but leave the celestial temple intact, and then the Pah-wraiths are going to be able to go back into the celestial temple unopposed.
right,
That
right,
was what she wanted.
right,
But Rom is the one who figured out what it was going to be, told O'Brien, and O'Brien did make the station into that weapon,
right,
but he changed the trajectory of the beam so that it didn't go to the wormhole. It went to the shuttle that he and inhabited Keiko were on, and so
right,
she was blasted by all the energy, and it killed the Paw Wraith inside her,
right,
freeing her from its grip.
right, right. But the reason I bring that up specifically is that this cult that is worshiping the Paul race, they have such a level. They should. I mean, they have obviously weren't there for the Keiko story per se, but they should have enough evidence of the Paul race being malicious to
Yeah.
not worship them. Now, what's curious is that the story that Gold Dukat says for why the Paul race are good is the same one that people use when they talk about why the devil or Satan supposedly rebelled from heaven, and Milton's Paradise Lost is kind of the epitome of this version where Satan wants some sort of free will for himself and prescribes that for humanity. He's selfish about it, but the idea is that he wants freedom from God, and he's going to give free will to humanity. And that's basically the argument they have here: is that the Paul race want to give Bajorans freedom or something, and that somehow would have stopped the the
Well,
Cardassian.
I don't know if it was what wanted to give him freedom, but more that the Power Race wanted to take a more active role in Bajoran lives and society. So
Sure.
the prophets were definitely more standoffish and more like
Right.
observers, and they kind of gave you stuff that would give you the option of following a path or not. They never
Right.
really inflicted that on you, whereas it seemed like the Pares wanted to be more direct with
Yes.
that. And so they were cast out. And I guess the only way you can really direct anybody is either A, by inhabiting them, or B, being in the celestial temple to do it, because they were cast out of the celestial temple and therefore lost all of their ability unless again they inhabited somebody. So they, had to inhabit Dukat, had to inhabit um Keiko,
Jake and Coco.
inhabit Jake to do anything. Whereas the prophets, while in the celestial temple, they talked to Cisco pretty much whenever they wanted. They had the orbs, another way of communicating with people, and uh, you know, various other things they could do to get to
Are the
people if they
orbs
wanted.
just ways to communicate, or are they actual prophets? I thought they were actual
No, the
prophets that are
no,
like
the
in.
orbs. I always took the orbs as being a part of them, but not prophets themselves.
Oh, I've
So
I've
it's
seen them as like literal prophets who have like physically manifested
oh,
as an orb, but
I always took it as more like
or
personality
conduit.
traits.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
yeah, I mean it's the same thing, but like like a perspective that a prophet has, they put inside this box. That's why they had those names. Like you had the orb of prophecy, the orb of time, the orb of change, the orb of whatever. So these were all based off of different perspectives that the prophets had on existence.
Right.
And then, of course, you have an orb experience, which you then see things and experience things, which you then have to interpret from that context.
Right.
You just had an orb experience with the orb of time. So you relived an event, and now you have to reframe your understanding of said event because you viewed it through a different perspective.
Okay. Okay.
So that's how I've always taken them. Not that the orbs themselves were prophets, but more
Oh.
like a part of them, like like a personality. Like
Mm,
this one is more friendly. This one's more giving. This one's more ambitious. This one, so forth and so on.
okay. Curious.
Um,
But
but
anyway,
before we really end this, go ahead.
I was just gonna say my what I was emphasizing there is that like the reason cults exist, I think I would say in our world, is because there is the spiritual is a realm that is confusing and mysterious, and people are. I would argue. I think this is you know we can see this throughout the world. People are drawn towards spirituality, and it's very tempting to try and form that for yourself. Like the reason cult leaders, I would say, become cult leaders is because if you can get worshipers for yourself, if you can get followers, you gain power. It's funny that book, The 48 Laws of Power, that I've been talking about. That's literally one
Mhm.
of the rules, one of the laws. Create a cult for yourself for power. Like
So
that's. Go ahead. Go ahead.
so again, that guy David Weddle, who was the guy who helped develop this episode, he's the one who also studied cults and stuff. He calls it the uh, fundamental human longing. So it's this desire that humans have to connect, be a part of something greater than themselves, that tends to lead people towards some kind of religion,
Right.
and that it can come to you at any phase in your life. And it's also why cults tend to be so appealing to people, because a study was done that showed that typically the founders of a lot of the cults were people who were deeply religious but then became disillusioned with their religion at some point, and
Right.
so they walked away from it. But that need that for the connection, that longing, was still paramount in their lives. So they formed a group in order to have that. So I think that's kind of the point, is that when you have people who have such a need and you're trying to fill it in some way, you may find yourself involved in things like these cults, and then you have the leaders who tend to twist those to their own ends, as we see Dukat do here in this episode.
Right.
And I always thought with this episode too, there's an aspect of Dukat that we see here that kind of is reminiscent of how he was in the episode Waltz, which, if you remember that episode, where this was shortly after the fall of the Dominion, the death of Zial. He had been captured, and he and Cisco were on their way to a starbase
Hmm.
for him to be delivered into their custody.
Hmm.
But then the ship is attacked. They get on a runabout. They crash land on that weird planet. Cisco's like body is half broken, and Dukat spends a lot of the time in the episode trying to convince Cisco of how much they're alike, and how if it just there, but for the flip of a coin, basically one would be a hero while the other one was this you know deposed leader.
Right.
And I feel like that's something that Dukat never let go. And we see some of that in this episode too, because he talks about how in the beginning, when the Power Wraith chose him, or how he made himself the available vessel to the Power Wraith, he did it because he had been seeking revenge upon Cisco,
Yeah.
not Starfleet, not
Hmm.
the Federation, not even Bajor.
Not even
He was
Bajor.
seeking revenge against Cisco.
And he calls
Cisco is the
himself the Pod Race emissary.
Yes.
Yeah,
He
it's
it so once again, I was struck by that, and I was like, it's interesting to me how much he really wants what Cisco has.
right.
He wants the notoriety, he wants the title, he wants the honorifics, he wants the
The love
worship.
and the
He
worship. Yeah.
wants the because whether you can debate how Cisco feels about a lot of it, but I mean, I think one thing is pretty clear. Cisco's been very uncomfortable with assuming that role.
Right.
Eventually, he gets to a point where he's okay with certain aspects of it, but he would never want people to be worshiping him.
Right.
And that's where Ducat takes it to the next level. He can't just be the emissary. He
Right.
wants to be, that's where the other part of his nature that we see comes in. He wants to be loved. He wants
Yes.
these people to love him. He even tells Kira, "Don't you see how much they truly love me?" Like he wants her to acknowledge that, just like he wanted Cisco in Waltz to
Right.
acknowledge, their similarities, their interconnectedness.
Right.
And all this episode did over and over again, I was just like, he wants what Cisco is so bad.
Right.
And then when he realizes he's not going to get it, that's when it's okay, kill everybody, wipe the slate clean, and I'll go somewhere else and start again.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. How many statues of Cisco are there on Bajor?
I guarantee you, there are a couple.
Yeah.
We haven't seen them, but I guarantee you that by now
Yeah.
there are a couple.
Yeah. Oh man, Gul Dukat's whole thing about like, yeah, the the occupation was bad, but I made it not as bad.
Yeah, it
Like,
could have been so much worse, but I tried to make the killings even.
yeah.
Like, what? What are you
And then
talking about?
to turn it around and be like, the occupation would never have happened if we had been following the paw race. Oh my gosh. But what I was trying to emphasize a minute ago was the idea that a cult, I think, is defined by a few things. One of which is a cult of personality, in that there is a leader who is allowed special privileges and is treated as somehow above. He calls
Mhm.
it the Bajorans his children. Like, that's so demeaning. Like, I know that when Kai Wynn does it to Kira, my child,
When she
we
says it
hate
to
it.
anyone, when she says it to anyone,
Yeah,
oh man, that's like one of my favorite lines of hers that she says to hate is when she encounters Kira, and she says, "I feel your anger towards me, my child,
yeah,
and I forgive you for it." Like
yes.
I've never
No,
wanted
you
to hurt
don't.
a person
Yes,
more in that
yeah,
moment.
right,
Come down off that bench.
yeah,
I want to hit you in the face. Like you're too
right.
high. Get over here.
Exactly, exactly. When a cult leader demands that they get special privileges for themselves, like, yeah, this is a miracle that proves to you that I am who I'm supposed to be. No, what? No.
What a I mean, got to give him props for how quick
Quickly
his
he thought
mind
of it.
works. Yeah, he
Yeah,
came up with that on the fly.
yeah,
Further proof that I
yeah,
am your emissary.
yeah. Uh,
Boom,
my
baby.
my favorite scene though is when Marco Lio as Cole Dukat. After he tried killing the mother in the airlock, and he comes back and he's all very concerned. She's okay. She's going to recover. Good. Go. Send a team and make sure an accident like this never happens again. Like he doesn't come off as nervous and,
Mm-mm.
oh my goodness. No, he comes off, he plays the part perfectly in that
He's
middle.
shocked, he's hurt. I
Yeah,
can't believe this would happen to one of my people,
right.
and a newly minted mother, no less.
Exactly.
Lock
Of
down the
my child.
station. Right. Lock down the station,
Yeah,
secure those airlocks, have them checked and checked again. This
right.
can never happen to my people.
Right.
Uh, by the way, totally not my baby. I know, looks just like me. Not mine. Not mine.
Yeah.
Didn't it?
Yeah, well,
I
all
mean,
the features for this child doesn't have like a he's a one of our people written on the baby's forehead. No, it's Cardassian. Um, the other thing I was gonna say is someone I've listened to. I think they were talking about how one of the things about belief and that is in belief systems. Sometimes people try going back to the blind faith point. Some people try and demand that you prove your faith with an example of blind faith and blind faith in particular of don't believe your lying eyes. Like you need to disbelieve something that you know to be true to prove your fealty. You need to be so committed to this belief system that when it contradicts reality, you believe the belief system over reality. That is supposed to be kind of a defining characteristic of something that's a cult or at the very least
well,
a false belief system of some kind. Now, people will obviously can argue that about Christianity. We don't have time for that. It's already nearly
I will
2 hours
say
in.
right. I will say that there are certain aspects of Christianity under the large umbrella that is Christianity. I believe that there are aspects that would fall under that,
We
but
can
not
debate
all of
that.
it.
For
Okay.
the moment, we'll
Okay.
put that aside, just for the sake of saying that um, what you are not as a Christian, you are not supposed to be blind in your faith, in your following of someone else, and in of your you're not supposed to be blind. You're supposed to be educated. You're supposed to be self critical. You're supposed to be someone who doesn't just follow the people around because you don't trust yourself. That's I guess that's part of it. In a cult, you're not supposed to trust yourself. Just trust the glorious leader. No, you are supposed to combine personal faith, personal belief, and self education. You're supposed to use that, and in conjunction in community, you guys work out what you believe, what that means. What how do you live that out? Um, and when you have someone demanding you're not allowed to have intimate like husband and wife aren't allowed to have children until the great leader says so. No, I know there are cults that say they were Christians that have done that kind of thing. When Vedic uh, Fala says that, like, oh, we used to know back then that the pleasures of the flesh were not to be indulged. It's like, well, no,
And that's when something
that's an
and
example of
that's
sorry,
you
just
know,
of over proving yourself of
yeah.
like, oh no, you're not allowed to have sex with your wife. Oh, like no, that's the whole
And there have
point.
been right, and there have been religions that throughout the history of religion that have imposed rules similar to that.
Right,
But those are also things that again were in the past.
right,
Supposedly, or we're supposed to have been people who learned from that and recognized that it was not necessary and moved on from it. And so, that's showing the evolution of your faith in that you kind of you scrape away the stuff that doesn't work and you keep the things that do. You scrape away the stuff that makes no sense and keep the stuff that does,
right.
Um um God, you said something a little bit ago about being critical of your faith and you know uh, it's not wrong to have questions. It's not
Yes,
wrong to
yes,
question your leaders
right,
and discuss things, and it doesn't make you a bad Christian. We'll just use that.
sure,
It doesn't make you a bad Christian if you question these things.
right,
If you question your Christian leadership, you should question them, because if you don't, then they can get into methodology of thinking that they can do no wrong, or that
right,
everything they do is right.
right,
Which I don't know how you want to phrase it, which one is worse, but I think that is also something that you could argue is that we see today is that we have certain religious leaders who are like, you shouldn't question me because I am the leader. You should just do as I say because it's through me that you will have salvation, that you whatever. And some people do accept it and again absolve themselves of any kind of responsibility or accountability because to them they are just practicing their faith in accordance with so and so. But
Right.
it's like, but if that person, if you don't question that person and it turns out they are doing something wrong, or to extend the continued metaphor that we see here in this episode, if they are a false prophet, you could be setting yourself up um for catastrophe. And this is
Right.
ultimately what we see for Vedic Vala, who never questions Dukat. He believes him, he trusts him, he is willing to apologize for him. And ultimately, we see that that leads to his death. He was so willing to commit to it that even in the face of all the evidence as presented by Kira, a person he knew and trusted,
Right.
that even when presented by all of it, he still could not let this go, and it
Mhm.
cost him his life. And
Yeah.
it's a tragedy. It truly
Right.
is a tragedy because he had, as far as we had seen, Fala had done nothing wrong. He was a teacher. He was a spiritual leader. Yet he never seemed to cross any like path of doing anything wrong, being a negative influence
Right.
in the community.
Right.
So yeah, it's a shame when people like that are lost, um, because then you're just further outnumbered by the more nefarious, insidious ones.
Right.
So
Right. Oh, and Vincent also points out, yeah, cults also tend to cut people off from their families and friends. Like taking someone to an abandoned station in another sector, 3 light years away. That's how
I
good the
s-
Dominion's technology is,
well,
apparently.
we don't know that that's how far away it was. She could actually have been a great deal further away. The transponder had a range of 3 light years, so
Right.
she could have been beamed aboard a ship at the maximum edge of its range, and then still taken even further away. We don't really know how far Empok Nor is. I mean, we know that it's a couple of days away at the very least,
Right.
because when O'Brien and company went there before, we knew they were going to be staying for a while to
Right.
do their job
Well, I
and
can't.
so forth.
When they said 3 light years, though, I was like, "That's incredible.
So it is incredible.
That's
It is that's a heck of a
absolutely,
difference, a
yeah,
distance. Yeah, that is amazing. Don't get me wrong. They say it with such casualty, like oh, I
yeah."
mean, has this is 3 light years, and then if you
Well,
do
it
the
makes
if
you
you
it makes you want to compare,
do the
like, what
work.
is what is warp 9 versus,
Yeah,
like, how does that compare?
do the work. Look it up for yourselves. What the distance in miles is 3 light years, and I guarantee you, your jaw will drop
Yeah.
when you figure it out. And that's fun to do with a lot of these shows because they will give you like a frame of reference of distance or whatever, and it just seems so heady sometimes that you don't think about how far away something is. But yeah, do it. Do it a couple times. Like I remember they did it, and it was talking about like the distance between like Earth and Jupiter and stuff. And relatively speaking, Jupiter's right around the corner. But then when you look at like how long it would take our shuttle to get there versus the Enterprise, you're like, oh my god,
Yeah.
like just I don't know, just have a baby now because they'll be 20 by the time they get there. Like it's stuff like that. It's
Yeah.
crazy. So yeah, do it sometime. Figure out when they
Oh,
tell you stuff like that, 2 light years, 3 light years, 5 light years. Figure out the difference, and then do the big one,
yeah.
Voyager. Voyager was 70,000 light years
Yeah.
from Earth. So, or from the Alpha Quadrant, I should say, not just Earth,
Yeah.
but from the Alpha Quadrant.
Right.
So yeah.
You
Um,
saying all that, you would really, I think, be interested in the 3 body problem, because that is legitimately a part of the plot, is how light speed works, and because you can get close but you can't cross it in the 3 body problem. So,
mm,
um, so
so
they go places with that plot, with those plot lines. So yeah,
Well, here we are in this nearly 2 hour long episode, and I knew that it was going to be a good one because of all of the religious connotation that was here, and there was
yeah.
so much that we were going to have to cover. So, in this last 5 minutes or so, uh, final thoughts on the episode. What do you got?
Yeah, yeah, faith is not supposed to be blind. It's supposed to You're supposed to have reasons for it. Oh, actually, that brings me back to the beginning of the episode when what's the
All the way back to
Esri?
Odo.
Well, yeah,
Odo,
Esri
Ezri,
Dax.
Bashir, Ezri, Bashir, Odo,
Yeah,
and Ezri.
Esri says twice, like, "Oh, that's so nice," when Odo wants to like be close to Kira. But well, first off, one of the things about values, like being a believer, is the reason you're supposed to marry other believers is because you're supposed to be in tune with what you guys believe and what your values are. Because if you have conflicting values or values that aren't, in line, it can create conflict. So for Odo, it needs to be a true belief system on some level. He can't just pick one because that makes him close to Kira. So when Esri is just like, "Oh, that's so cute," it's like,
Well, and Kira, for her credit, I believe that she does basically
she's
say
legit.
that.
Yeah, she's legit for sure.
Well, because
Um,
he says, um, he talks about how he wants to be with Kira during the religion, the ceremonies, and everything else, and they were like, "Well, you have to have you have to." Kira says you have to believe it in order
mhm,
for that to work. And so I think it's
have it all.
Esri who's like, "Well, would it matter to you if he, practiced another religion, if
Mhm,
he like the Klingon faith or whatever?" And
right,
Kira says, "Well, no. If he's actually getting something out of it and
right,
it's working for him, then no, that would not be a problem for me."
right.
To which Odo quickly counters, "But if I did that, I wouldn't get to go to services with Kira, which was the whole
The whole
point of
point.
this."
Yeah,
So,
I'm
yeah.
just pointing out that both of them are just not quite in line with my thinking of like you're not supposed to go to be with someone else. That is legitimately how so
Well,
many people get sucked in, though. Of like, I want to go because there's a cute girl. I mean, I read a story just a couple days ago about someone that's their life story is they went and became a translator in South America because they wanted to follow a girl they married. They married a woman. They became translators, and then the guy lost his faith and he got divorced. Like, kind of tragic situation. He only became a
well,
believer for a girl. You're not supposed to just do that. You're supposed to believe for yourself. And
Well,
then
and
finally,
they don't do that though. I mean, he's sitting at the table
no,
waiting
he.
on her
I'm
while
saying Kira
she's
saying that I don't care if he believes in Klingon religion. My point is that you said earlier, like there are lots of religions, so maybe they're all at some level right. Well, the Christian argument is that if the truth is a singular thing, there is only one truth, and if there are conflicting, things that different religions say about what they believe, like Christians and Muslims do have conflicting beliefs about Jesus himself, so you can't say that they're both right about that. They have one of them's right, or both of them are wrong at the best. They can't both be right. So the argument there for Kira and like Odo and having different belief systems, well, okay, fine, in the sense that in Star Trek, these are on some level they are personal to
Mhm.
cultures and to people. They are not like Christianity in some in supposed to being defined as some sort of ultimate truth level. They are unique to their culture. And to be fair, in Star Trek, these religions have manifested proof of something
Yeah, I was
about
going to
them.
say a lot of the religions in Star Trek have like proven themselves.
Yeah, like
Like
Kalis. I know Kalis was cloned in
Kalis,
that episode. That
but that he was cloned from the original Kalis.
yes,
So
exactly.
Kalis really existed, and we've seen them go into the Klingon afterlife a few times. I mean, always to hell apparently, because no one gets to
Oh,
go to.
they've actually gone there. I haven't seen them
Yeah,
go
they've
there
gone
yet.
to because it's called. So you have Stovacor, which is like the honored dead, and then
Right?
you have Grethor, which is hell, and Grethor is overseen by this demon Klingon called Feklar, and we actually see a representation of Feklar in a TNG episode, but then we see Grethor and the massive gates of Grethor in a couple of Voyager episodes. I think there's at least two episodes where they do Klingon stuff and they end up at the gates of Grethor. So yeah, we've seen Hell a few times. We have yet to
I
see
don't remember that at the
Stovacor.
moment, but I'm sure you're right. Yeah. Anyway, point just being that in Star Trek, they take religion in a little more hands-on kind of way, and that means that they manifest in ways that I I don't think manifests in the real world, but that's just for storytelling purposes. But a lot of storytelling does
Yeah.
that, and I could talk about that for a while, but as I
Tune
have
in for
before.
our next After Dark, folks.
Yeah, 2 hour mark. Here we go. Yeah. So anyway, point being is that that scene was interesting. It makes sense within Star Trek. I would say it doesn't make sense out of Star Trek, but it was just so serendipitous when she's like, "We're talking about forgiveness," and literally today, the forgiveness practice guide. We're doing that as a church. I mean, I can't. I
Well,
just like what.
well, for my part, final takeaways of this episode are that I really love the way they reintroduce us to Dukat. We kind of see the full evolution of this character at the end, who, what going into this whole trying to get what Cisco has, what Cisco is, this obsession now, like full-fledged obsession with Kira and what she thinks of him and how she views him. We've watched it progress from fascination and curiosity to infatuation to, you know, I would never call it love. I would definitely say that it's you know, just it's skipped love entirely and gone into full blown obsession. He wants very much to possess her, and he's willing to literally do anything. We've watched him jump through several hoops to attain her attention,
Yeah.
and it fails spectacularly, even to the point where he was manipulating his daughter to make him and Kira have to spend time
Time
together.
together.
So, yeah, um, all of that to see that as we are coming into the final part of our story here, um, he now has attained all of the things to make him the perfect villain. Almost, I would say he's very close because he now has he's oh man, I broke my watch. He now has the attention of the main enemy, the main god level enemy that
Mm,
of that have been supporting our hero here, which is Cisco in this case.
mm,
So um I can't wait to rewatch these episodes and see how all this plays out. Um when it comes to the religious stuff, I've always found in especially in sci-fi shows how they frame religion, because sci-fi has always been to me the place where um we can get out morality tales. We can talk about certain social issues that we have a hard time discussing in any other media because of the fact that it lends a fantastical element to it that we don't have in a sitcom or a police drama or whatever, right? Um, so it's kind of hard sometimes to figure out what the message is they're trying to give us.
sure.
And this episode really plays with that a lot because there's so much hardcore stuff you need to understand about the Bajoran faith, the Bajoran lore, in order for the episode to work itself. But then to know there's undercurrent in there about um, cults and suicide cults and um, false belief systems and so forth. As we've talked about throughout this episode tonight, I think we both can agree that a lot of the elements of those things do exist in our world as well.
Hmm.
And it's clearly very hard for people to distinguish between them, but it's critical that we at least make the attempt, because if we don't, we can definitely end up with more Heaven's Gates out there
Hmm.
if we just let things kind of go to a certain degree. So, great episode. We'll watch again
Yeah.
for sure. And
Yeah,
yeah,
this was a good
this
one. It
yeah,
was a Kira-centric episode. Barely anyone else in the main cast even showed. I don't even Cork showed up. Now that I think about it.
Cork was in it at the very
Oh,
beginning. He
that's
was
right. He serves
serving them
drinks.
drinks. Yes, he
That's
was
right.
serving
That's
them
right.
drinks. But
Briefly,
yeah, it was
briefly.
very very quick. But we don't see Cisco.
We
We don't. No,
do.
we
No.
do. That's right. He
Yeah.
does when they're investigating
The
Kira's
quarter.
disappearance. So we see Cisco and O'Brien. No Jake. No Nog. No
Yeah.
Garrick. No Rom. No
All the
Lita.
main. You see them all the
All
main
the main
cast.
cast.
Yeah.
Yes, they're all there. So there you go.
Briefly. Briefly. They got to go home for the weekend.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's going to do it for us. I'm not
Well,
gonna.
there is
Go ahead.
one last thing I got to say, Perry.
Yeah.
Today is May 4th,
Oh
so
yes.
may the 4th be with
Speaking of
you.
cults, we didn't talk about. No, just kidding. Yes, today is May the 4th.
Yeah,
This is the kickoff of the 3-day event that is Star Wars extravaganza. So you
right.
have May the 4th, then you have OG Star Wars Day on the 5th, which is also Cinco de Mayo, which is
Mhm.
tomorrow. And then, of course, you have Revenge of the 6th. So
Mm,
3 days of Star
so
Wars related events.
I'm sure
Um,
you've seen the meme before, but my roommate, some friend sent it to him, and I've seen it before, and he shared it with me. But it's a picture of Patrick Stewart, and it says, "Use the Force, Harry." Gandalf.
yes, yes.
Four
It's like
different.
how to piss off 4 different nerds groups in one thing. Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. I
So,
have to say, thank you for bringing me into the Star Trek fandom because that was the one of the four I would have missed out on if I
oh
hadn't been
yeah,
here.
I remember. What's funny about that is I remember the first time I saw it, and just I'm the idiot who had the typical reaction. Right, I read it and was like, oh, "That's not right." I was like, "Oh, they got me. Like they got me," because I was instantly triggered.
Yeah,
Captain
yeah.
Picard would never say he's not Canada. Oh, you got, that was that was definitely me. So yeah,
Uh,
and it was
it's
years
great.
ago, years
Yeah,
ago.
it's a
So
it's a classic meme, I have
yeah.
to say. Yeah. Uh,
Well, all right, guys, that is going to do it for us on this very long episode of the Fire Caves. I'm
this
not going to
has to be our
do
longest, I'm
it.
sure.
Definitely is. Definitely
Yeah.
is. I'm not going to give any Trek updates or anything like that. I will save that for our episode
Wait,
next week.
the '90s references. Oh, you already did that. You
We
already did
did
that.
that.
You
We
already
did
did
at the
that. You
very
did that with
beginning.
Heaven's Gate.
Yes,
Heaven's Gate. Sorry.
yes.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
97 in the Heaven's Gate. So yeah, not going to give any other Trek updates or anything like that. This episode, we'll do that next week. Please feel free to tune in to all of our episodes on our YouTube channel and let us know what you think of the food episode that we did a couple weeks ago. We may do another one because I found another cookbook. So
Oh boy.
yeah, no. Yeah. So we got some other things to try potentially. I've got to work my way through a few of them, so we'll see. But until next week, guys, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.